So we're starting a series today called Starting Over. And such an interesting topic because the reality is some of the most inspiring stories in our world are starting over stories. You may not recognize this woman's face. You might know her name, Laura Ingalls Wilder. Know that name? Ever see the show Little House on the Prairie? Ever read the books? In her life story, and I don't have time to tell the whole thing, but there were many, many times where she had to start over. She started out as a teacher, and then she got married to a farmer, and so she quit her job as a teacher, she became a farmer. Then her husband became partially paralyzed, and she had to start over again. All through her life, she had to start over. At age of 43, when her husband became partially paralyzed, one of her friends started saying, "Why don't you write a story about your childhood? It's such an amazing story." And so at the age of 43, she decided partly to start over as an author. And so she wrote a book that was rejected by every single publisher she sent it to. 43. Do you know how old she was when her first book was published, Little House in the Big Woods? 65. She was a 22-year overnight success. And over again, she'd get these rejections and have to go back and start over and start over and start over and start over. Stories like that are amazing to me. They really inspire me because it's never too late to start over, right? It's never too late. As long as you're breathing, you can start over. And many of you need that today because you're going to be starting over, or some of you are starting over. Maybe you're starting over in your career, starting over in a new phase of life, or starting over in a romantic relationship, or in a second marriage, or you're starting over in a habit that you've tried to start many times and failed on. I mean, this is the reality of our world. Every single day. Today, there will be millions, probably, of people around the globe who are going to try and start something over. And unfortunately, you know that for many, many, many of those people, their good intentions will yield the exact same results, right? They will try, and they've got all this new experience, and they've learned so much, and it won't matter, right? It won't translate into new results. Literally, as I was doing prep for this message, I came across a woman who was writing into an advice column, and she said, "The man I'm dating has been married and divorced 6 times. Should that be a red flag?" First off, if you have to ask that question, you are not ready to date. But yeah, it should be a red flag. And here's the thing about that guy. Probably a really nice, well, hopefully he's a nice guy, who knows. But the reality is, every single time he put that ring on a finger, he was like, "Oh, this is the one. This is the last time. This is the love of my life. This is the one who was made for me. This is..." Every time he began his start over with good intentions, and every time the outcome was exactly the same, right? Because it doesn't matter what your intentions are. It doesn't matter what your experiences are. It doesn't matter how much knowledge you've gained. None of those things will determine whether or not starting over is going to result in success or failure. There are other things that we have to do, and we don't do very well in America. If we're going to start over, we got to actually do these things. And that's what the series is going to be all about. What are the things you need to do to start over and be successful the next time? That's what we need. So I'm so indebted to Andy Stanley. If you ever hear me teach, you know that he's one of my favorites. I listened to a podcast, and months ago I was listening to a podcast. He did a series called Starting Over. And I listened to it, and it impacted me so much. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to teach this because of how much I learned. And so I hope to be able to share some of this best stuff. And you hear anything good in this series, just assume it all came from him. But interestingly enough, he says, when you want to start over, this is the word you got to start with. It's the word responsibility. This is where starting over starts. It starts with a word that in American society is almost a swear word. You want to see how bad we are at this word, you just have to look at the story of this guy, Adric White. So you see the little tag here below? Robbery suspect shot. This is an amazing story. So this guy is a bank robber. He's 18 years old. He was trying to rob a convenience store. It was his second robbery attempt. So he walked in this convenience store, pulled out a gun, took the cashier to the front with a gun to his head. What this poor felon didn't know was that there was somebody in the store who had a concealed carry permit. They pulled their gun out, aimed it at Adric, and said, "Drop the gun or I'll fire." Well, Adric spun around, and the Good Samaritan opened fire. Shot poor Adric, fell to the ground. Police came and arrested him. He survived. But that's not why I'm telling you the story. I'm telling you the story because of what Adric's family said after he was arrested. I'm not making this up. If this customer's life was not in danger, if no one had a gun on him, if no one pointed a gun at him, what gives him the right to think that it's okay just to shoot someone? You should have just left the store and went wherever you had to go in your car or whatever. In other words, our poor son's not to blame. This Good Samaritan should never have just shot him. Isn't it stunning? And yet, at one point, it's not all that stunning, right? It's the world we live in, right? This is the world we live in. If we were summarizing the American slogan for many people, it would fit on this t-shirt, right? It's not my fault. It's not my fault that I lost that job, my marriage ended, I have no close friends, I have no savings, I have a bad job, I can't get promoted, I keep dating losers, I attract unhealthy people, I live with no sense of God in my life. It's just not my fault. It's someone else's fault. I am not to blame, and this is how we live in our American society so often. It just isn't our fault. And now, obviously, the obvious question is, are we getting better as a society as we adopt this no-fault mantra? No, of course not. We all get that. We are not getting better. We're getting worse. But here's the hardest part of what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, ready? One author said, in many cases, the blamers are not aware that they are blaming others because this has become a habit. Blamers are usually good people that think they have been victimized. Now, if I'm being honest with you, that scares me. Blamers are not aware that they are blaming others. What if that's true? What if that's true of you and me today? What if we're sitting here today and in our life, there are areas of our life where we are blaming others when we should be taking responsibility and we're not even aware that we're doing it? Could that be true of you? Could be true of me. So that means this subject is really important then. So we need to give some serious thought about this. How do we take responsibility for our lives? Because here's what we all know. You all know this, right? We don't get better. Our world doesn't get better with blame. If you want a better future, you can't choose blame. You cannot blame your way into a better future, right? And if you want a better future, and I sure do, then we better give serious thought to this. So would you please open up your program? Inside, you'll find these notes. Would you take them out, grab a pen, something to write with as we get into this today? Welcome to those of you who are watching on YouTube. So glad you have tuned in today. The notes are in the comment section right below. We'd love to have you open them up and follow along with me. Let's jump right into this. Number one, understand the high cost of blaming. If we're going to learn how to take responsibility for our lives, we have to start by understanding just how serious this subject really is. We have to understand the high cost of blaming. Sometimes when I'm writing messages, it's really, really hard to find stories. Not for this one. This is the easiest. I could preach on this for weeks and weeks and never run out of new content. For instance, there was a professor at Northwestern University who was fired recently because it was discovered that he was cashing his dead mom's Social Security checks for 6 years. 6 years. The government caught him, arrested him. The university fired him. He was a professor at Northwestern. Highly educated, right? Super intelligent. That's a tough school. And he's cashing his dead mom's Social Security checks for 6 years. But don't worry, he's not to blame. He said it's not his fault. He has extreme procrastination disorder caused by depression. What? I mean, it's not my fault. Don't you understand? It's not my fault. I couldn't help it. I wanted to not cash those checks for 6 years. What? It doesn't even make sense. And this is the world we live in. It's crazy. Now, why is it so easy in our society to do this? Well, the reason it's so easy is because from the beginning of creation, humanity has been this way. If you've ever read the first book of your Bible, the book of Genesis, you know what I'm talking about. In the opening pages of the Bible, so let me, if you have never read the book of Genesis, first book in the Bible, the first chapters in the Bible detail how God created the world and the universe and everything that we see around us, how he created us. Now, some people read the book of Genesis, and especially those first chapters, and they interpret it figuratively, like it's the idea of how God did it. But it's not literal. It's just creating the imagery in a way that we can understand. Then there are those who teach, no, this is actually literally how he did it. Adam and Eve are real people. I tend to be on the literal side because in the New Testament, Jesus talked about Adam and Eve as being real people, not figurative people. And I just kind of think that if you can bring yourself back from the dead, then what you say goes. So that's just kind of how it goes, right? So you don't have to believe that. I'm not arguing for that today. Whether you believe it's literal or figurative, the point is this very, 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 very old story tells us what human nature is like. So if you know the story, you know that God creates the world, creates the universe. He puts Adam and Eve in a perfect place. It is Disneyland times 10,000. Beyond anything we can imagine. It's perfect. They never get hurt there. They will never cry there. It is a perfect place. He literally says to him, here you go, here's your planet. There are about 1 billion things you can do, but there's one thing you can't do. See that tree right there with the fruit on it? Don't eat it. Now, some people are like, why would God do that? Well, how can God know if they love him and will obey him if there's absolutely no way to not love him and not obey him? So he had to have some way to say, well, hey, because we love him and he asks us not to, we won't. So the bar is pretty low, right? It's like billions of things that you can do, one thing you can't. It's not like he made this test hard, right? I mean, build a wall around the tree. He never said you couldn't chop the tree down. Anything else. But no, that's not what happens. You know the story. So one day, the spiritual enemy of God appears in the form of a serpent, appears to Eve and says, hey, listen, you know, this fruit's really good. Why don't you try some? And so Eve takes the fruit, she eats it, and she's like, this is good. She gives it to her husband. Adam eats it. And all of a sudden, the very first episode of Naked and Afraid began. Very first episode in history. So way before cable thought of it, happened in the Bible. They are naked, they are afraid. And they run and they hide. And this is interesting. In the story, God comes searching for them. Do you understand the implications of that, by the way? When you are ashamed and you are hiding, God comes searching for you. So he comes and he finds Adam. He says, what are you doing hiding in these bushes? He said, I was naked and I was afraid. And he said, uh-oh, did you eat from the fruit of that? Did you eat the fruit of that tree? I told you not to. And Adam says, I did. I knew it was wrong. I knew you asked us not to, and I'm so sorry. Have you never read the Bible? Don't you know? That's not what he says. Look at what he says. He says, it was the woman you gave me. She gave me the fruit, and I ate it. But she gave it to me. Don't you understand? So, by the way, look at the accusation. The woman you gave me. God, I think you owe me an apology here, right? You gave this woman to me. It's like the very first time we blow it as humans, the very first reaction is blame. And so God goes to Eve and says, what have you done? And Eve says, you're right, I did it. I ate the fruit you told me not to. I'm so sorry. Then I gave it to Adam, and it is all my fault. I am responsible for this. Oh, the Lord God asked the woman, what have you done? She said, the serpent deceived me. That's why I ate it. So from the beginning of human history, blame has been the reaction. Now, why do we blame? Fear, obviously, right? Fear of being punished, fear of having held against you, fear of loss, fear of consequences. Can you imagine the fears in Adam's mind when he ate that fruit and felt all of a sudden, it's like, oh my goodness, God's going to be so mad at me. Wait, he can be mad at her. So I'm just going to shift his anger over by blaming, and we've been doing it ever since. We do this in order to avoid being hurt, in order to avoid the consequences of what we've done. Now, here's the problem with this, and you all know this. Every place where a culture of blame develops, things go bad, right? Is there a culture of blame here? Washington, D.C.? Who's to blame? It's a funny question, isn't it? Well, the Republicans. Well, the Democrats. Well, the independents. Well, the economy. Well, everybody but us. And everywhere where an environment of blame develops, things fall apart. You don't need to look at the government. Look at churches, the state of the church in America. As churches decline and shut their doors and sell off constantly, the average church size is 78 and declining. It is a dying institution, not because God wants it to be, But so much blame happens in church. I pastored a church, many of you know, that died, went under. In the early 1990s, I was in Madison. I pastored a church there for over 6 years. 2 years after I left, it died. I cannot tell you how many times I sat in meetings and we talked about what was happening in our church, and the only answers given were all blame. Over and over again, I was told, well, it's just the end times. It's just the end times. That's it. No, people, their hearts are going to be hardened. It's just the end times. It's the end times. It's all Satan's fault. It's just tough right now. People aren't looking for answers. It's the pastor's fault. It's like, wait a second, I'm the pastor. I was blamed an awful lot. It's like everybody is responsible, but not us. Everywhere a culture of blame develops, things die, right? Have you ever seen a person destroy their own life because they would not take responsibility for their choices? We all have. Their fingers always pointed outward. It's not my fault, it's what my parents did to me. It's not my fault, it's what my ex-spouse did to me. It's not my fault, it's what that boss did to me. And the result of that, of course, is destruction in their lives, because we all know this. When blame develops, you fix no problems, you drive healthy people away. Do you like being around people who never take responsibility? Isn't that a lot of fun? Yeah, it's exhausting. You learn nothing from your failures, make no progress, you destroy any sense of team. You know why? Because you can't be on a team with a team member and have any real team if every time something goes wrong, they point the finger of blame at you. Can't have a team that way. You become passive because, after all, it's not even your fault anyway, so nothing actually gets done. And then, of course, God has to reteach you those lessons. Nothing good on this list comes from blaming. Now, here's the question again. Does someone come to mind in your life who struggles with blame? And the most important question is the follow-up. Did you come to mind? Do you have an issue with blame? Isn't it super easy to come up with our list of all the people in the world who have a problem with blame and not put ourselves on it? Now that's easy. But what if you and I have an issue with this topic and we're not even aware of it? What if we're blaming because nobody is going to put their name on that list? But it's clearly happening, right? What if our name belongs on that list? Well, that means, number 2, we have got to do this, and this is what the rest of the message is going to be about. Let's do some honest self-examination. Let's see if blame is really an issue for us. Let's talk about some honest self-evaluation. There are some questions I'm going to make you ask. They will not make you feel good, but boy, is this important to consider this. Let me show you just how serious this problem is. Do you know who this man is? Some of you know, you're an NBA fan, you watch a lot of NBA, you know that this man, his name is Donald Sterling. He used to be, up until 2014, the owner of the NBA team, the Los Angeles Clippers. Until one of these TV shows that does undercover stuff caught him saying all of these terribly racist things to his girlfriend at the time. It was unbelievable. I can't repeat them. They're awful. The problem, of course, is he owned an NBA team. Most of them weren't white. And so the owner of this team is caught saying all these terribly racist things. It cost him his team. The NBA made him sell it. They were not going to let an owner be a racist and own a team because they didn't want people treated that way. The incredible thing was the interview after all of this blew up. He did an interview on CNN with Anderson Cooper. And he said this: when I listened to that tape, that secretly recorded tape, I don't even know how I can say words like that. I don't know why the girl had me say those things. Oh my God. So Anderson Cooper says, wait a second, you're saying you were set up? He said, well, yeah, I was baited. I mean, that's not the way I talk. I don't talk about people for one thing ever. I talk about ideas and other things. I don't talk about people. So you get it, right? Isn't that true? Isn't that all true? You all believe that now. Poor guy, he was baited. Poor 80-year-old attorney, billionaire guy, poor guy. Do any of you believe he was baited? Does he believe he was baited? Here's the thing about this. Everything he said in that interview, by now, he believes is 100% true. I don't know the guy. I don't need to know him. But if you tell that story over and over in your head, pretty soon you begin to believe it. I'm not a racist. I was just baited into saying those things. That's how this works. Is we just believe what we tell ourselves. Self-awareness in this area is so hard. This is what we're up against. It's so hard to think responsibility rather than blame. So God has given us an amazing tool for this. Because God loves us and doesn't want us to choose blame, wants to choose responsibility, He's given us an incredible tool. It's this tiny little word called pain. Pain is the dashboard indicator in your car that goes off when something's really wrong with your engine. It's like, hey, you better stop and take a look at this. Some of you have this indicator going on in your life today, and God is trying to get you to stop what you're doing before you start over again and look at your life and take responsibility. So there are two really important questions. First question is this: where am I in pain? And I really want you to think about that. Is don't just write those words on your paper. Think about it. Where are you in pain today? Because some of you are in pain in your finances. You got a lot of pain in your personal finances. Some of you have a lot of pain in a romantic relationship, maybe in your marriage. Some of you have a lot of pain in your parenting relationships, maybe with your parents or with your kids. Some of you have a lot of pain at work. Some of you have a lot of pain with your career. Okay, so stop there. Pain is often the warning light that God's trying to get us to slow down and look at the reality of what we're experiencing with honest eyes. He wants us to look at the reality. What's the reality? That's why blame is so bad. Blame is about pain avoidance, right? Blame is about, I didn't do anything. Don't be mad at me. Don't be angry at me. I'm avoiding the pain. That's why blame is so damaging. And what you need to understand is pain is oftentimes God's most powerful tool for helping you and I see what we need to see that's wrong in our own lives. I remember one time I was memorizing some verses from Hebrews chapter 12. And I've taught on these verses so many times since then because they just blew me away. In Hebrews 12, the author was writing to these Christians and said, here's what I want you to think about painful things that happen in your life. So I want you to think of them as if God was disciplining you like a child that he loves. You ever see a good parent discipline their children in a positive way? Child makes a mistake, does something really wrong, and the parent steps in reasonably and gives correction to that child. The child changes their ways and their life is better for it, right? That's the imagery. And so he says, I want you to think of everything that's painful in your life as if God was lovingly disciplining you like a loving parent. It doesn't mean that everything painful in your life is God disciplining you. Don't hear that. He's saying, I want you to think of it that way. Because obviously, if you're being disciplined by a parent, the number one question in your head should be, hey, why am I going through this? And what can I do to prevent this from ever happening again? So he says this in Hebrews 12. He says, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living. Your life will get better if you let yourself be trained by your pain. If you let yourself be trained by your pain, your life will get better. And that's what I really want you to understand. Our God is not a God who hates you, is against you. He will use the pain in your life as an indicator life to point you at the areas of your life that are broken so that you can fix them and your future can get better. Do you want a better future than the past that you've had? If you want a better future, then pain is God's tool to bring you into a better future. But you will never, ever experience the power of that tool if all you do is blame everybody else for what's gone wrong in your life. You won't change and you won't heal and you won't grow. You will repeat the same mistakes from your past. So where are you in pain today? Some of you are in relational pain, financial pain. Some of you, the pain is in your relationship with God. Where are you in pain today? And then second question, what do you own from that pain? What do I own from that pain? There's a great story, another great story in the Old Testament, the story of Jonah. You ever read that little book in the Bible? Jonah was a prophet of God. He did what God wanted until one day God told him to do something he didn't want to do. There was this very, very wicked and cruel nation nearby, and God came to Jonah one day and said, I want you to go to them and tell them about me and my love for them. And Jonah's like, I hate them. I hate these people. There's no way I'm going to do what you just told me to do. You want me to go that way? He got on a boat going this way. But you can't run away from God. So he caused a tremendous storm to come up. And the waves were coming over the side. The wind was out of control. The ship was going to sink. The sailors were all terrified. And Jonah says one of the most responsible statements in the Bible. Look what he says. Pick me up, throw me into the sea. It'll become calm. I know that's my fault that this great storm has come upon you. I don't know what your past has been like, but when I read words like that, I want to be Jonah's friend. I want to be friends with someone who can sit there and say, you know what, this is my fault. I own this. I want to be friends with someone like that. Because you just know your relationship's going to be better. So years and years and years ago, I had a friend who was a counselor, and she used to talk about this in counseling sessions all the time, where she would try and help people take appropriate responsibility for the pain in their past. Appropriate's really important. And one of the tools that she would use is this. It was a responsibility circle. And so when she was dealing with somebody who had been really, really hurt, she would say, here's the circle. And she would say, what percentage are you responsible for of the pain that you've gone through? So depending on what she was talking through with them, she'd say, you know, I'm about 25%, I'm about 50%. She would let them self-diagnose. So with every painful thing from your past or every painful thing you're going through currently, this is what I want you to do. I want you to draw a circle on a piece of paper, and I want you to say, what percentage am I responsible for? Now, there are two extremes to avoid. Extreme number one on your notes, write this down, don't own everything. Some of you, personality-wise, you are own everything people, and you overdo this. One of my friends that I know really well went through a counseling time where the counselor made him do that circle. And my friend had been severely sexually abused as a young girl. And at that first session, when the counselor said, here's the circle, what are you responsible for from that sexual abuse as a child? She actually put a percentage down. What percentage was she actually responsible for? Thank you. None. Not a single percentage. And she didn't know that. It took a long time of counseling before she understood the truth. And then she was set free from the shame of that. Some of you are trapped in shame from things in your past because you're taking responsibility for something that you had zero responsibility for, and you should just be grieving it. Not ashamed of it. Okay, so there's that extreme. But the other extreme is a little more common. Matter of fact, I hesitate to even call it an extreme because it's more like what we all do. Don't tell partial truths and rewrite your stories. That's not actually extreme. That's just who we are. That's what we do. That's what Donald Sterling was doing. The owner of the Clippers, that's what he was doing. He was rewriting the story. Because the story to all of us who read his comments are, oh my goodness, Donald Sterling is a racist. But the story he wanted us to know is, I'm not a racist. I don't even talk about people. I was baited. He was rewriting the story, and we all do it. That wasn't true, what he was saying. But here's the thing about this. Again, this is, you know what happened? If he's still telling that story, he believes it 100% today. Adam and Eve did this in the garden. When God confronted them, hey, what'd you do? Adam told partial truth, right? The woman you gave me that fruit. Now, was that true? Absolutely. Was it the whole truth? No, because what he should have said, and the moment I saw it and held it in my hands, I knew it was the fruit you told us not to eat. I knew it, and yet I ate it anyway. That's what he should have said to God. Did he say that? Nope. Partial truth, rewrite the story. It's what we all do. We go through pain, we rewrite the stories. so that we don't have to be responsible. The problem with that, of course, is Adam then couldn't deal with the real problem. Donald Sterling can't deal with the real problem. Donald Sterling has racism inside of his heart, but he can't deal with that because he's not responsible. He was set up. And we can't deal with our garbage as long as we tell partial truths and rewrite the story and leave out the parts that make us at all responsible. We never change or heal or grow when we're blaming. In that message I mentioned from Andy Stanley, he said this: in our past where things fell apart financially or relationally or academically, we all want to tell a story that's mostly true, we just don't tell the whole truth. And after you tell, and this is the scary part, after you tell your story that's 90% true long enough, you start to believe it's the whole truth, and then you hide. If you don't own your part of your own history, you will lay the groundwork for undermining your own future. Do you understand that? You cannot blame your way into a better future. You cannot. It cannot be done. You cannot change and heal and grow from a position of blame. So this was such a tough message. I mean, I've had a little pain in my past. So some of it, obviously, when I do the circle of responsibility, what happened to me as a child? 0%. I can say that. And then some of it, much of it, not 0. I mean, if you know me and you know my history at the church that I was at before this, one of the things, if you know me well, you know that absolutely I need to be honest about is that I have no business ever hiring another human being, ever. Ever. My track record of hiring was atrocious. I mean, I hired the wrong people over and over again. Just again and again. One time I hired this person who had lied on the resume, lied in the interviews, and then guess what they did when they came? Then they only told the truth. No, they told a lot of lies, and I got hurt terribly. And yet when I do that circle of responsibility, what percentage am I responsible for the actual lies this person told? 0. But for creating the hiring systems that would allow that person to get in our church, I am 100% responsible for that because I created them all. And it wasn't until I was able to step back and say, okay, this is what I am responsible for, that I could actually change it, right? As long as I looked at myself as the victim of what this person had done, what was I going to change? I had to say, I'm responsible for this piece of this pain in my life. Because once you're responsible, then you can change it. Now, the cool thing that this does, when you do this circle of responsibility, you look at the pain in your life, you start saying, here's what I'm responsible for. 2 things it'll do. First off, it's going to lower the anger that you have towards that other person or those group of people that you're really mad at, especially if it's not a 0 in there. It's like, how can I be really, really, really mad at that guy who did all that lying about me when I'm the one who hired him? It's going to lower a little bit of that anger towards them when you look at and take responsibility for what you can. But the other thing is, and the most important thing, once I look honestly at it and say, okay, I own this. I can change it. I can say, I am responsible for this piece of this pie. I can change that. And sometimes, like I said, God is using pain in our lives to get us just to say, I'm not good at conflict. Some of you, that is the thing God is trying to get you to own. You have no idea how to do conflict resolution positively. It is destructive. I'm not honest with my spouse. I'm holding back. Something in me attracts unhealthy people. I'm not handling my money very well. I'm not a very forgiving person. My temper is ruining my life. I run from intimacy. My strategy with my teen isn't working. I'm addicted. I'm trying to avoid something from my past. I'm not processing. I don't have the marketable skills to be easily employed. These are true statements. And for some of you, something on this slide or something I could put on this slide is the truth that God is trying to get you to say, own that. You don't own it all, but you better own this. This is where I'm in pain, and this is what I own from my pain. So here's my question again. I'm going to finish it with this. What if we're blamers? What if it's easy for us to think about people who do a lot of blaming in their life and ignore ourselves? What if right now in your life, right now, there's some area of your life where you're blaming someone else, and God is trying to get you to say, I know what they did was wrong, but what about your part? Then the most important thing I can get you to say is, what's causing you pain today? And what do you own from that? What do you own? Obviously, this is a big subject. Big subject. We're just beginning. The next 3 weeks, we're going to go through, what do you do next? Okay, so great. You see something? Now what? We'll cover that next week, and I hope you can come back for that. For those of you just exploring your faith here, responsibility is a big theme in Christianity. God wants us to know we are responsible. Adam and Eve didn't get away with blaming anybody else for their choices. And in the Bible, God is very clear, we don't get to either. We don't get to just blame our way out of our consequences for what we've chosen. Jesus actually was big on trying to help people face reality. When he was here one time, a verse I quote all the time, he said, if you want to be with my Father in heaven, you have to be perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect. Now that's reality. And that verse was meant to make everyone in the audience go, are you kidding me? I want to be with God. I can't be with him then. Because if perfection is what's required to be with a perfect God, then I can't be there. And Jesus would go, yes, exactly right. You can't be there. You will never be there unless you let me make you perfect. In Hebrews, it says that when you put your trust in Jesus, the one who died on the cross for us, your soul is made perfect forever. His words, not mine. Made perfect forever. That's what Jesus is offering every human being. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. You can't blame your way into a relationship with God. If you want his help and power and life inside of you, you have to come clean. You have to stand there and say, I own this God. I am not perfect. And maybe these are the words that some of you need to say in your heart to him today. You need to say, Jesus, I am not perfect. If perfection is required, I'm out. But I've heard that you died on the cross to pay for what I've done that's wrong, so that I could be made perfect forever. Would you please forgive me? Please come and make your home inside of me today. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, would you all please do something for me at the end of this service? Would you take your response card out of your program? Today it's pink, so real easy to see. So grab your response card. Even if you're a regular attender, we ask you to do this every week. Just go ahead and put your name down. Oh, not all of them are pink. Never mind, mine's pink. All right, just for me today. So maybe you put your faith in Jesus or you're new to your commitment. Just let us know about that. If you want to talk to a counselor, some of you do. Because some of you, when I did that abuse question, if you were doing the circle of responsibility, you would not put 0, and you were abused as a child, and you need to deal with the shame of that. Okay? You need to see a counselor, so write counselor on there. We can get you information. Then just drop this in one of the 2 offering boxes back by the doors where you came in. Thanks so much for coming. We hope to see you again next week.